Welcome back to the podcast and welcome back to the vlog. That's right. If you're listening on the podcast, there is a YouTube channel. I've had a number of people ask me about my shop. Those of you have listened to or watched my podcast, my videos on YouTube, or listened on the podcast, you'll know that I am a deal guy. I love a bargain. I love to find a great deal, a great bargain. And my workshop is probably the single best deal that I've ever made, that I've ever found. And it's my air-conditioned, lit, full-blown workshop. And I got it on Craigslist. There's a whole story behind it. But folks have asked me about it. So I thought today I would film this episode from the workshop. So my man cave here in California is an old school classroom that I bought off of Craigslist for super, super cheap. How cheap, you ask? Well, when we moved into this house, I got a couple of bids on building a workshop in the backyard. Well, the bids were between $40,000 and $50,000. And I just wasn't going to do that. I am a thrifty bargain hunter kind of a guy. $50,000 was never going to happen. That was not going to happen. So I just started looking at different options, and I started using the interweb, and I started using Craigslist search tools that I could save a search and have it automatically alert me when something came up. One day, automatically, I saw a building, a modular building for sale about 30 minutes north of where I live. And I made a phone call immediately and found one of the buildings was still available. 24 feet wide, 40 foot long, air conditioned, lit, double insulated corkboard walls. It's an elementary school classroom, and the school district was moving to new units and selling the old ones. And I bought this. Now remember, $40,000 to $50,000 to build one. I bought this building for $2,000. $3,000 to move it and have it installed and plugged in. $5,000 for the workshop you see behind me. And it is my therapy. So enough about that. Today, actually, I do want to talk about assets, but I want to talk about maybe a good way to put it is asset protection for spontaneous assets, spontaneously acquired assets. I have had several examples recently of friends who have spontaneously purchased new big ticket assets. And it's important for me just to back up and make sure that those of you who are new here to the vlog on YouTube, Kraig with a K, Strom. So if you're on the podcast and you want to see the workshop that I'm talking about, because I am quite proud of it, it is an awesome, fully functional wood shop. And I would not have gotten it had I not done a little bit of research on Craigslist. Anyway, if you want to see that, go to the YouTube channel. But myself as an individual, I am a certified financial planner. I'm 25 plus years in the financial world, but I'm also in a unique position that I am a paralegal at an asset protection business and estate planning law firm. That's what we do at the law firm is estate planning. Everything from your basic living trust, wills, powers of attorney, all those basic things, right up through advanced business strategies, S Corps, LLCs, C Corps, Delaware, Wyoming, offshore, all of it. We do that. Our overriding focus, though, is asset protection. Asset protection in a nutshell for today's video is putting up speed bumps in the way that would prevent legal action for creditors, for them to be able to legally come after and take your stuff, putting up roadblocks that might promote negotiations rather than giving people an easy access right into taking your stuff, okay? Because where I'm at here in California, it's very easy to go through a civil case and get a judgment that seems crazy. Like nobody would ever force an elderly couple to sell their home to pay a judgment. No, but that would never happen, right? Yes. Yes, I've actually met an elderly couple that it happened to them, that the courts forced them to sell their home to pay the judgment and basically put them into being renters for the rest of their short lives. Unbelievable. That kind of stuff happens in states like California. Now, the title of this video will be something like Asset Protection for Spontaneous Assets or Spontaneous Asset Protection, something like that, because it was really driven by this interaction that I had with a close friend of mine, actually two of them. And this one friend, he said, I'm going to buy the building that I have my business in. And I said, congratulations, when are you going to do that? And he said, next week. I said, whoa. If you buy a building in California and you buy it in your personal name, you might imagine that you are personally now at risk for anything that happens on that property or in that property to anyone in or on that property. You now are personally connected to the risk of that property if you buy it in your own name. Now, then someone might say, well, I'll put it in my revocable living trust. Well, that's good, but your revocable living trust has no asset protection whatsoever. It's revocable, which in the eyes of the law means that you're still the person in charge, pulling the strings, and so you can be personally liable for anything that happens to an asset like a building that's held in a revocable living trust. Okay, then someone says, well, just put that in an LLC, a limited liability company. Oh, okay, well, where would that limited liability company be? Oh, it would be, and by the way, this is actually happening in real time at a conversation that was at lunch. Right? So other people are chiming in. This is not my friend. My friend said, I'm buying a building. And I said, when? And they said, he said, next week. And then someone else said, well, do this. And someone else said, do this. And then I'm sitting there with my friend then looking at me each time one of these other people said something and said, like, waiting for Kraig to respond. Right? And then, so this next person had said, just put the building in an LLC. Right? No problem. And then my friend, of course, looked at me again and I said, yeah, but in California, if you have a valuable asset inside a limited liability company, whether it be a business or whether it be real estate or whether it be, some other kind of asset, okay, a plane, for example, that happened with another friend recently. In a California limited liability company, let's look at the risk, because inside, and I have some paint thinner here in a pickle jar. So this just on my workbench. I have a lot of various different, just some paint thinner that I used on a project recently. But let's just use this as an example, right? So we're going to use this as our California LLC, right? So we go ahead and we put our building and we title it in the name of this California LLC. Those of you on the podcast, I'm holding up a Mount Olive's bread and butter sweet pickle jar. So we put our building inside the LLC. It's a California LLC. Now, our building is inside this LLC. We're protected. We're totally 100% fine, right? Wrong. If a liability now happens at the property, inside the building or on the property of the building, that liability would stay within the container, the LLC container. It would be very difficult for the liability to rise up from, hear the word, inside the LLC and come out to you personally. So from an inside liability perspective, a California LLC is the same as a Montana or Wyoming, Nevada LLC. They all generally provide inside protection. Now, let's say my friend has a California limited liability company, and he is the shareholder. He owns 100% of the shares of the California LLC. But now the liability arises over here, outside that limited liability company. He has a car accident and hurts someone. His wife has a car accident and hurts someone. Run into a bus full of nuns, as our founder attorney likes to say, Harry Barth likes to say. You have a personal liability over here now. Now you're being sued personally. And if it goes to the point where there's going to be a judgment awarded against you in a civil case personally, they will look at the assets you own, and lo and behold, you own shares of a California limited liability company, and that limited liability company owns your building. And over here, that personal judgment, the court says, we're going to award the plaintiff over here, we're going to award them shares of that LLC over there to satisfy the judgment. And lo and behold, somebody else now owns the shares of the LLC that owns your building. That is outside liability taking your asset. That is why asset protection in California, no. Did I say if you have an LLC in California that you should immediately go out and change it to some other kind of corporate entity in California? An S Corp? No. I said asset protection with these vehicles in California, very problematic. California is terrible when it comes to asset protection. So in that case, spontaneous building acquisition for my friend, what did I say at lunch? Whoa, you really might want to consider buying that building in the name of an LLC that is set up in a state that is extremely protective from outside risks. And it turns out that Wyoming is a very good state for that type of asset acquisition. And so I encourage my friend, slow down just a moment, take a beat. Let me help you through my firm. Let's get my team on this job and get a Wyoming LLC formed and buy the building in the Wyoming LLC from day one. You'll be set up in a state that provides both inside and outside protection. So now, if I had a cowboy hat, I'd put it on, Wyoming. Now a Wyoming LLC gives you that same inside liability, is very difficult to come out, but an outside liability is not going to go after the shares of a Wyoming LLC. There's some really specific legal reasons why that the Wyoming LLC is a very bitter pill. That you don't want to go after a Wyoming LLC. It's a very bitter pill. It's not an asset you'd want to go after. So what we've done in that situation now for my friend is taken that spontaneous asset acquisition and built it, right? Took a moment, just a few days. We did a little bit of a rush. It was about a week, we got it done and got a Wyoming LLC set up. So now that building acquisition can be in a Wyoming LLC and start from day one in a protected position, okay? That's important to note. Now, you heard me mention, for example, a plane. Same thing. If you've got a spontaneous bone in your body, you might be guilty of this, where you've gone out and bought some big ticket thing. I have friends who went off to Florida, and the next thing you know, they didn't go to a timeshare meeting. They went and met with a realtor, and they bought a vacation rental. But they bought a vacation rental that they're going to Airbnb in their own name. They bought it in their personal name because they didn't want to miss out on the deal. So they did it quick and impulsively, and they just had a rental property with short-term renters planned to come in. And I learned about this at this was actually at a business meeting, not necessarily a club luncheon or something. I just learned about it, went, wow, where'd you buy it at? And they said, it's in Florida. It's just outside of Disney World. It's beautiful. We feel like we got a great deal on it. We couldn't pass it up, so we bought it. And I said, oh, great. That's awesome. Did you buy it in your LLC? And they went, what do you mean? We have it in our living trust. And once again, people think that a living trust provides asset protection. It does not. It doesn't provide any protection at all. Okay? Then they said, well, we're going to put it on Airbnb and they cover us with their insurance. No, they don't. They do not cover you for your personal risk associated with that Airbnb. They'll cover the Airbnb rental. Yes, there's a big amount of insurance that comes with that Airbnb plan, but they're not covering you and protecting you from civil liability that could reach out and go after your other assets, right? They're not. You don't want to rely on something like that for coverage. And I said, oh my gosh, at the very least, Florida does have pretty decent LLC protections, and you might want to talk to a law firm about getting an LLC to protect it because your living trust provides zero protection. They were so surprised. They didn't know that. They did not know that. Okay. So if you're going to be out there doing some sort of a spontaneous asset acquisition, whether it's real estate, a plane, yes, your plane should be in a limited liability company, separated from your business. I met someone at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and they had purchased, the three brothers had purchased a plane under their business because legitimately it was one of those situations where, because their territory had expanded, they were in the laundry and equipment, not laundry, it was construction equipment sales and maintenance business, construction equipment. And they had expanded so much that they bought a plane. And I said at this chamber mixer, I said, oh, please tell me you did not buy the plane under your corporation. And they, well, yeah, it's a company asset. Oh my gosh. So picture this. You've got a $600,000 plane now tucked into your most valuable asset, which is your business, the golden goose itself, okay? And if there's a civil liability that arises from within the business, all the assets that are titled under the name of the business are at risk. So why would you keep a $600,000 plane in the same bucket with everything else that could be at risk? You should have that plane in a separate, remember those LLCs, get a separate LLC. I'm holding up my jar of pickles again. Get your separate LLC that holds the plane. And then the LLC can lease that plane back to your business. And you keep those big ticket assets separated properly and reported properly. And you've shifted that liability risk, okay, outside of your company, for example. In that case, it was a $600,000 plane that actually made financial sense for this business because their territory was the whole Western U.S. and they could actually get places much quicker, especially because some of their equipment that they were responsible for really needed to be up and running fast. So sometimes they needed to get a hotshot crew in there and they would fly out, and sometimes they would fly out executives, the owners, okay? So that's great. Glad you can afford a plane, but don't put it inside the same entity as the golden goose, in this case, the primary company itself. It's the same reason you don't put 3 rental properties in one limited liability company, because now everything inside there is at risk. When one thing happens at one rental property, it could take all 3 of them inside the LLC. Spend a few extra dollars and get a separate LLC to silo those risks. Okay, so you might have guessed that I'm kind of passionate about asset protection and estate planning. I am. If you have questions about your asset protection, what is it? What do you need to do? What should you do? What might you want to consider? You want to have your estate plan reviewed, your asset protection reviewed? Send me an email, Kraig with a K, Kraig, at kraigstrom, STROM.com. Kraig with a K at kraigstrom.com. Now, once again, if you're listening on the podcast and you want to see the workshop behind me, I've got project down here that I worked on, a new light fixture. I actually am in the process. I've done some really cool projects lately in my workshop. We're not going to go into all that, but just know if you want to see a nice backdrop of a man cave wood shop, you got to go to the YouTube channel, Kraig with a K Strom. Subscribe over there. Have yourself a great one. I'll talk to you again real soon. Bye for now.
Information presented is for educational purposes only and is not intended for solicitation, sale or purchase of any security or financial product. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and your tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed here. The term personal pension refers to a marketing name designed to educate future retirees and retirees about the economic principles behind creating their own pension-like income. The term personal pension is not intended to be confused with a defined benefit pension plan offered by an employer or by a government entity.